Here's Mad Men Season 6, Episode 8, titled The Crash. One of the better episodes in Mad Men history. The difference between reality and the fiction that we all create. That's the theme of this episode. And of course, one of the underlying themes of Mad Men in general. But this is what they kind of really nail what this episode is all about. So Don using the same strategy for his ad campaigns as he uses to get back his mistress, and arguably speaking, Don uses the same strategy for his ad campaigns for anything in his life. It's all about the superficial, all about like his rhetoric. And he, like the last scene in this episode is about him talking to Sally about Sally realizing he doesn't even know her father, and Don saying everything's going to be all right. You'll forget about it. Just forget about what happened. Just forget about the burglar, what happened, because that's how Don deals with it. It's like going on to a new campaign. The flashbacks of Don being brought up in a whorehouse when he was a teenager, and basically it's the whole thing about the woman selling themselves to the clients, and Don using what he learned in the whorehouse in his campaigns about selling yourself. But unfortunately, women are not campaigns. Like, talk about a man who's going to have many of issues being brought up in that type of environment, and like women that he deals with on a daily basis selling themselves basically for financial reasons, and Don just assuming that that's sort of the same thing as his ad campaign. Of course, this is the episode where everybody is on high, everybody's on speed episode, where they just nailed it. They nailed this, what speed is all about. The art of feeling superficial but not feeling reality. That's what drugs really are in a lot of ways, especially the upper drugs like cocaine and speed and that kind of stuff, where even the hallucinatory drugs so for someone who did a lot of drugs back in the day, and someone who worked on a lot of movie sets for a couple years where you're working 16, 18-hour days, and everybody's doing speed on those movie sets because you're working 18-hour days, day in, day out, and the only way you can really work those days in a good way is when you're on speed. And there's also the irony of like trying to capture emotions, but all the crew and some of the cast, generally speaking, are on a superficial high, and that's sort of what they just nailed it. The director of this episode just nailed that kind of feeling, and that's sort of what being high is about. So Don and everybody else is high, but they're not really feeling true emotion of death, anger, hurts, about one of the characters in the show dies, and about really dealing with death in a kind of like logical, like grounded fashion, where basically people who don't want to deal with it do drugs, and you go into that fantasy world, but that's not what fantasy world is all about. But at the same time, you can argue that advertising is the superficial. Advertising is what being high is on, because you're selling a false emotion to sell a product, and that's sort of what Don's world is. That's the only thing that Don knows. That's why he's great at his job, but really he knows nothing else besides that. So then when Sally and Bobby get when they're at Don's house and Don should be there, and a female burglar walks into her home, that's reality. And of course Don's at work living in the superficial where he should be at home, so these kids do not have to face this situation. In the end, Don's life is his campaigns, but really nobody knows who he is, and even he doesn't know who he is, because he constantly lives in the superficial. And they're using speed in this episode as an allegory of what Don is all about. It's about living on heightened emotions, not real emotions, and that's what drugs are all about. Where you think that when you're on drugs, you think when you're on pot, you think when all these people are on marijuana, whatever like that. And even sometimes when you're drunk, you think that you're feeling all these feelings, but you're really not feeling anything. You're just feeling the superficial. And only when you're sober, only when you're grounded, is when you can really feel what life is all about. And of course, none of that is in the advertising campaigns that even in today's society that they try to like throw down our throats, because we want to feel the superficial. We're all basically succumb to drugs in any kind of way, because drugs are so much easier than reality, and that's what advertising campaigns are all about. So in the end, nobody really cares about the important things in life, the kids, the marriage. Like Don's worrying, like basically talking about trying to get back his mistress, instead of like talking to his wife about what their marriage is about, what the feelings are. So he's always moving, he's always spending all his time and concentrating all his time nonsense and basically not what the real problems are, what the real, like, it's like going into superficial problems, and then becomes like a domino effect. And that's what this show is all about, and that's what advertising is all about in a nutshell as well. It's talking about the superficial to sell a product, but not really telling about what things are really about. That's my review.